a fairly shallow forum tonight, which we think might be the start of the coronavirus effects. But for those, I guess, I'll go through the structure of the blast furnace anyway, but I think everyone should be on top of it. We have a code section, which is the first 45 minutes. We have a meat section where we break in the middle for half an hour where we get to mingle and eat pizza. And then the last section is collaborate, so we're going to do something where we work on the code section that we went through in the first section. So that's the basic structure of each event. Always like to mention SISP, so SISP sponsored event, pay for pizzas, and also dash work space that actually give us the space for being able to host the blast furnace. So big thanks to them. I also mentioned here that the bathroom is just in the door behind the big false wall there. So tonight, the code section is going to be on JavaScript, so we're going to have a look at the basics of JavaScript and how to use it, and that will be presented to us by Garth, who works from Mudbar, which is a digital agency that heavily uses JavaScript, I assume, and TypeScript, and all the other front ends that come with it. The next blast furnace, we're still figuring that one out. So we've got two presenters, and we're not sure which one it's going to be. So we're just sort of juggling that one. We've sort of got the initial presenter who may be tied so we're still feeling that out. Could be on robotics, so it could be a basic level one where we get some robots and make them move through some mazes and tracks. But we'll see how that pans out. Hopefully some sort of hardware-based event, but I'll put that up in the meeting as soon as it's ready to go live. As always, if you can get onto the swag, $10 a shirt, and the money goes back into running the event. For the media, so we've got a few hashtags now. Latest one is blastfurnace.io for our Facebook, otherwise @blastfurnace for Twitter and Instagram, and Wi-Fi passwords are there. So jump on the network and see yourself familiar with operating there. Otherwise, we'll kick off and see what we get to.
Awesome. Yep.
And then your segment there, Cam, is going to sound horrible because the mic is over there. Yeah, I'll try to turn that way, but we'll get a directional mic next time. So work through it, then I'm happy to take it whichever way you want. So we'll keep it follow along. So.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm Garth. I work at Mudbath. I am a development manager. Previously, I was a senior developer, team lead. So not on the tools as much as I used to be. So we'll see how we go with this JavaScript intro. So this is just an entry-level JavaScript course. We'll learn some basic things such as conditions, statements, and repetitions, so loops. Pretty self-explanatory slide. It's being used all over the web at the moment. Pretty much if you want a website, it's written in JavaScript. So it's probably handy to know. Okay, statements and variables. Okay. Statements are complete lines of code that cause the computer to do some actions. Variables store data and are modified using statements. So, what does that mean? A variable here is A. A equals 1. So when we refer to the variable A, we are actually getting the value 1. B equals 6, C equals A plus B. So statement is that we will end up with the sum of these A and B, which is 7. Flow control statements are pretty much, well, they say they change the flow throughout a program. So think in the real world, if you're hungry, you'll go get something to eat. If you're not hungry, you don't get something to eat. So here we have that example. And in JavaScript, well, this we do if a condition, then execute some code. Otherwise, execute some other code. What we'll do is we'll jump into this game and we will test. This first one is onboarding, so we'll just show you how to use the coding game infrastructure, and then we will actually do some if statements. All right, so if we jump onto that link there. So once we've got that up, let's grab this. Yeah, then you've got your web assembly, which is making a move, but mostly, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah, that's it. It's the standard, which is the important part. People can actually write implementations of WebAssembly now because there is a common standard that they could follow. Before, everyone had their own kind of approaches. Yeah. Okay, good. So, running through the tutorial, the section on the left is the actual game, and under it will be the instructions on what you have to achieve. So on the right, you choose your language. Tonight we're going to be in JavaScript. And here we can see the game loop. So every time this ticks over, we will get some new variables passed in from the system. So I'll explain more exactly what this is doing in a second, but we can take this code, copy that, how do I do that? Oh, yeah. How's that? A bit more? Cool. All right, so I couldn't copy that, but this code looks like pretty much what was there. So if we look on the left here, Your program must destroy the enemy ships by shooting the closest enemy on each turn. So each time this goes through, it's classed as a turn. Okay. On the start of each turn, which is the game loop, you obtain information on the two closest enemies, enemy 1 and distance 1. The name and the distance of the first enemy, and the name and the distance for the second enemy. Before the turn is over, output the value of either enemy 1 or enemy 2 to shoot the closest enemy. So what this is doing is, in JavaScript, this is your flow statement. If something, if condition, then do something. Otherwise, it's else, do this. So what this is actually saying is every loop, we get the first enemy's name and the second, like the first two of the closest enemies, the first one and the second one. We need to make a decision which one is closer and then output the name of the closest enemy. So here, if the distance of enemy 2 is less than the distance of enemy 1, that means 2 is closer than 1, then output the name enemy 2. Otherwise, output the name enemy 1. So that's what this part here is saying. If we run this, we play our test case on the side here. And I zoom up. Where is that? It doesn't help that we're on a Mac and I'm a PC user. We'll see what we can do here. I'll refresh the page. Got it. Skip. Okay. We got Chrome. There we go. So the hardest part about this is actually figuring out where to put the code. A lot of this boilerplate is complex, but really it is just giving you the variables for each turn. So the code that we have to write is here. So as you can see, what we just played didn't work. There we go. Now it passed. So that's pretty much the structure on how to set these games up. Does that make sense? Any questions? It's a bit confusing, right? All right. There's a lot going on, but really the only thing that we're looking at is that piece of code, which I'll zoom back in. Here. So does it make sense on why that is, what's actually happening there and why that works? Yeah? Cool. So you minimize that. They get progressively harder, so hopefully they're not all that simple. Okay, so this one we have to do ourselves. There is no copy and paste the answer. It is, so I can't pronounce that. So Thor's hammer has lost all of its powers. Will you be able to guide Thor towards the light of power to make the hammer whole again? So what we have is Thor here. He will be positioned somewhere on the screen, and we need to take his location and the location of the power, the light of power, and move him progressively towards that. So let's crank that over. The code was already there from last time, so I just reset that. So, yep. Okay, so the rules on the side. Your program must allow Thor to reach the light of power. Thor moves on a map which is 40 by 40. Note the coordinates x and y start at the top left. So up in the top left corner, you're at 0, 0. At the bottom, you're at the bottom right, you're at 39, 17. Once the program starts, you are given the position of light of the power of light in its x and y, and then the initial start of Thor. Each loop through the game, you need to figure out where Thor is in relation to the power of light, and then move his direction either north, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, west, northwest, and output one of those. So here we can see that there's nothing, no code written, and if we play the tests, he just moves southeast. Yeah, he's gone. So using if conditions, we need to figure out how to get Thor to the power of light, the light of power, whatever it's called, and they can be positioned anywhere on the screen. Do you want me to actually run through the, like, or let solution? Yep. We've got a solution already, eh? Cool. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is use variables. We have a variable here, which is a constant, and that's the remaining turns. That's the difference. We're going to use a variable called let, a keyword called let, which lets us change the variable. You can't change remaining turns during the game, but you can change the position of Thor. So that's the first thing that we need to keep, is the direction that we're currently heading. So we initialize at empty. So this will be the first part and the second part of the direction. So let me check my notes. So we're also going to need some a current position for Thor. So let's say and stop me if you think I've got it wrong since you've got a solution. Okay, so if the light wire is greater than the current position of Thor's Y position, then we want to move Thor forward. So we can use this plus plus. All it's doing is adding 1 to Thor. Okay, and then the direction of Y will equal south, because the top is, we're in the XY coordinate, Y is going south and X is going east. Else, if, so here we're chaining if statements together. So you can have multiple if statements in the same condition. It is less. Then that means we've gone too far and we need to change direction. Let's just copy this. And we need to go back up. So that's north. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to do was set the initial X to the current position of Thor when we first start, and the same with the Y. Okay, so that's got our up and down motion. So let's copy that. I'm not used to Windows on a Mac. That's all right. So now we're on the X. And we want to move east or west. Okay, so that will move us up or down, left or right. Now, we also now we need to output the actual direction. So to do that, we're going to create a variable called direction and add direction 1 to direction 2, and then output the result. Let's see how close we got. Didn't move. Anyone see why? So over here we have a error. So direction 1 is not defined. I can't spell. So this is good right here that it actually brings up an error. And this is a fairly standard error message that you'll normally see in the console of JavaScript when you're on a web page. So if you hit F12 when you're in a browser, I'll try now. No, let's just turn the volume, FN. Okay, so it's a bit hard to see, but this is a typical way of how we would debug a JavaScript application, is you bring up these developer tools, and inside the console, a bit hard to see, but we have an error. And this is normally how we would track down bugs within a running JavaScript application. This one doesn't tell us much because it's just the application's actually catching it and doing something here and showing something. Whereas normally it would just go straight back to the browser and then you'd get a stack of, we could probably jump in, but we could click this and go into the code and it'll show us where, but I'm guessing this is a minified file. It'll be thousands of lines and it'll probably crash the browser loading that. Plus we have 103 different errors happening, so that's not us. That's something else going on. All right, so if we correct the spelling, direction 1, you can see now when we select this IDE has highlighted all of the uses of direction 1. It's a bit subtle up there, but you can see this one's highlighted now, this one, and also down here. We can make sure that they're spelt the same. And then here, if we highlight that, you can see that we've got a use, and a use. Okay, so we run this. Almost. Oh, there we go. So does that make sense? How those if statements and what's actually happening there? Yeah, you'll see this pretty much exact syntax in C#, Java, TypeScript, probably others, but yeah. So yes, so there is one more condition here, and that's when they are at the same spot. But if they're at the same spot, then we've won. So well, that's when we've hit kind of the same X and Y coordinates. So yeah, we don't really need that condition. We could just tack on else at the bottom and just catch that final case. But yeah, we don't need that. Another interesting thing with JavaScript is we're using this string concatenation, it's called. We're adding two strings together. String is this kind of text representation. In the newer versions of JavaScript, which I'm pretty sure this supports, we can use something called string interpolation, where we can use a backtick, a $, and then a brace. And then you can close that and then do another $, and a brace, and close it off with a backtick. So now we can have more, instead of having all these pluses and adding string literals, which are like actual text, right? Having that with a plus, with a variable, then with a plus, and then some bit of text or whatever, we can actually write that in a way that keeps everything in the one set of quotes. So if we play this, we'll speed it up as long as it is supported, yeah. So it's doing exactly the same thing. So that's one of the newer features of JavaScript.
So essentially help you control the types and know what types to use and mix up types.
Not so much. It's JavaScript's it is typed under the covers, but really there's no concept of there's nothing stopping me from doing. Okay, so what started off as a string is now a number. There's nothing stopping me from doing that, so it doesn't actually enforce any type safety. This is why TypeScript was invented, to actually strengthen JavaScript. With types, sort of, it compiles down to or transpiles down to JavaScript, so it's a higher concept around the top of JavaScript. It adds types, but when you compile it, you end up with just JavaScript. All that stuff's removed. TypeScript's really just for the developer to ensure type safety. So an example would be if we go back to, if we wanted to have, we go back to where we were, wrong button again, with this, and we wanted to add, say, a hyphen in between. So, you know, direction 1 hyphen direction 2. You would have to do right. So you've got this kind of, you know, this, you can imagine this going on for, you know, 10 different statements. You've got a really long, it's not easy to read and see what's going on. Whereas when we do the string interpolation, this turns into and it's a lot easier to see what is actually happening. And you can do stuff like, you got pretty much code. Yeah.
You can run full code basically in that.
Yeah.
So you can add 2 numbers together.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-eval numbers you could do like that kind of stuff. Awesome. Any more questions on how that one kind of sits together? So I guess it's more understanding on how this thing is actually working. So these functions up here, each time it loops, we get an updated value of these, and yeah. Yeah. So that's the next section, is repetition or iteration with loops, being able to loop. So if we jump back to the slides. Loops. So pretty much like we saw there, that loop was, if we jump over here, while condition, execute some code. So if we go to actually, which one was the Windows key? This one. Back to our code, you can see while the condition is anything that resolves back to true. So 1 equals 1, or 7 is less than 10, continue. This is while true, so it's going to continue indefinitely. The game itself, the framework, dumps it when it's finished. So after, when remaining turns equals 0. Okay, so how do I go back in the slides here? Oh, yep. Cool. So we've got two different kinds of loops here. We've got the while, which we've just seen, and the for. The for to is what it does is gives you an index of where you are in the loop. So it will increment by a certain amount the value. So it will take, say, for variable, say for counter equals 1, and when repeat until counter equals 10. So you'll always get that counter incrementing by a little bit, and I'll show you how that works in this demo. Okay, so destroy the mountains before your starship collides with one of them. For that, shoot the highest mountain in your path. Okay, so at the start of each game, you're given the height of 8 mountains from left to right. By the end of your turn, you must fire on the highest mountain by outputting its index from 0 to 7. Firing on a mountain will only destroy part of it, reducing its height. Your ship descends after each pass. So we know we've got the code right. When we destroy every mountain, if we crash, we lose. Pretty straightforward, I think. Okay, have you got this one open up? You don't have a solution for this one? Awesome. All right. So here, here we can see the for loop. This was different to the while loop that's outside. So the for loop has 3 parts. It has the variable that we're tracking, a condition to keep on going by, and then something to move our tracked variable along. So this is an increment of this ++ increments by 1. So what we're saying is we have a variable called I. While I is less than 8, add 1 top. So since this is behind the I, it will happen after it's evaluated. So there's a couple of ways that you can have increment is in front, which this will resolve as soon as you read the variable. So this will automatically on the first pass, it'll be 1, I think. So like this, since this is done after the fact, it should be 0 from say. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but that's potentially something that could be true. So that's just a kind of, when you use this ++, you can use it in 2 different ways throughout your code. I'm not sure if that actually happens that way within a for loop, but if you did that inside your code, there's 2 different outcomes that are slightly different and can cause subtle bugs that you have no idea why. Cool. Okay, so we've got mountain height represents the height of one mountain. Okay, so this, from reading this, okay, so this would be, I'm pretty sure, an array of numbers. So this is a collection of heights. 8 items in the collection. Let's play it to start with and make sure it all fails. So it's firing at 4 all the time, then it runs into, so it fired at position 4, which is halfway along the along the game. So what we can do is we can console.log the, let me actually just copy that. This is a way to output to the console what is actually in a variable. So here we can see, where'd that go? Yeah, sorry. Actually, do we? I don't think actually console log here. It is console.error. I'm going to read the instructions. So here, our first pass we got 9, 8, 7, 8, 9 down to 2. So that's the heights of each mountain. So on each pass, we need to find which one's the highest out of all those numbers, and then return the index or print the index. So how do you think we will go about doing that logic? Okay. So first, we're probably going to need to know what we're going to output. We need to capture the variable of the index that's the highest. So let's create index. All right, and we'll set that to, just doesn't need to really be set. And the height. Okay. So what we need to do, so we need to save the height of the last mountain that we shot, and then figure out which is the next one to shoot on each pass. So what we want to do is if the mountain height, so we're looping through each of the items here, is greater than the last height that we shot, we want to set height to the new highest mountain. And record the index of that height. Okay, so the first loop, the first item in the array is going to be greater than 0 because we checked it's going to be 9. So it's going to set the height to 9 and store the index at 0. The next one is less, so it's not going to get into this condition. This is now false, so we keep the highest mountain in memory while this condition is false. True, sorry. Okay, so then really what we need to do is return the index of the highest mountain. So copy that.
Success.
There's a big in that one.
Okay, so there's a few things going on here that all happen pretty quickly, and what exactly is happening can be a little bit confusing. Do you have questions on why that logic works, or?
So the read line, passing read line is giving you which.
Yeah, so there will be. So it will be each read line gets the height of the next mountain, and there's eight mountains. Yeah. So what it's doing is we're looping over 8 times. We're iterating 8 times, and we're calling that parseInt. Yes. So the next line is saying, all right, if the height of the current mountain we just read is higher than the last highest mountain that we read, then set the height to the new highest mountain, and then set the index so we know which one to output. And then it's just going to loop over the next mountain. If it's higher, then it's going to enter this loop. Otherwise, it will skip straight over, enter this condition, sorry, and then otherwise we'll skip over. And then at the end, we just output. Probably not the most efficient way, but this is the boilerplate we've got to play with. So,
It's just the boilerplate, as you say.
yeah.
Restrictions, you look at it, so why didn't you shoot them out in the first place? There's no stat which is the highest shooter, but it's what
Yeah, yeah. And when I read that, actually, I thought you read once from the parseInt was actually bringing back an array, which it's not. It's actually, you're calling it 8 times. Yep. All right, so let me just new folder. We're not going to get, hopefully we're not going to get file path is too long in Windows.
Not from the desktop.
All right, so I guess we just run through, create a simple create React app, and we'll run through exactly how to find the resources, what the tools are, and then get in and actually run it, and then add, I don't know, a button that does something.
Yep. Yeah, just like add an agent. If we've got time, maybe 2 pages that you can wrap through. Don't know what place the routing.
Yeah, I'll be able to do it. We'll just bring the docs up and I'll show you a typical how you would start normally. How long we got? An hour. Okay. Cool. Can I zoom this? No.
Oh, see, that was working, was it?
I don't know what it's.
You'll be able to zoom the VS Code anyway.
Yeah.
Running because we won't be in the file explorer for long.
Yep. Yeah. Well.
I remember your 5 section, and you're just doing, oh, look how easy it is to print it or something. And you just click stick in, and you're like,
Yeah. From MDB. It's like the best way to make a website.
And he's dying on his phone.
Yeah. The more re's, the better. Cool. All right. So, do I need to explain anything, or just go for it, or?
Yeah, no, just that we're going to build basically what we're doing now, we're actually going to see how we can use JavaScript to actually work with a web page rather than just look at raw syntax.
Yep. Are we good to go, or is it still going? Cool.
Yeah, we can.
Not here, but what I'll do is I'll. What we can do. So how are we going to zoom this in? Do you want to maybe?
Want to zoom it in the Explorer, or do you want to just get to?
All right, I might just create a folder here, and we'll just call it, my React app. Okay, and inside here, so we have Visual Studio Code. Is it command that, or control? One less. Okay. Yeah. It's this whole updating npm packages thing, you know? Something's broken, I don't know why. Yeah. So we're going to need to have, if you want to do this, we'll need Node installed. Yep. So what we can do, so if you want to cancel that, we're in a folder. So let's just close this welcome window. No one wants to see that. Now it's Command Shift backtick. Or is it? Hold on. Toggle terminal. It's Control backtick. It's different on everyone. Like so. Okay, so now we've got a terminal. Let's close this window, whatever that is. And just type in node space dash v. A dash, a hyphen, sorry. Yep. And enter. All right, so we're at v10. So we should be fine with that. Okay. So we'll see what we've got here. Same. So, okay. So we're going to create a React app from scratch using some tools where we can just get from online. So first step in any development is Google. Let's open up Google and we'll search for create React app. I can get that a bit bigger. If I get the right button. Okay, so the first thing that comes up is the docs for React.js. Hit that guy. App should be, yep, that result. The second, yep, perfect. And then just create React there, that should be enough. So we scroll down a little bit, we have create React app, so we're about a bit further, there we go. So MPX is a CLI that's installed with Node, and what it will do is it will download this package from npm and then run the create command, which will then scaffold out our complete React application at this folder. Right? So we're going to change this slightly because we're already in a folder. You've created a folder. So just copy from npx up to the end of create React app. And we'll jump back into Visual Studio and paste into the terminal. And then press space. And then the path we want to build this at is dot, because we want to build it at the current location. Hit enter. So what this is doing is it'll go off, and instead of doing npmi, which will install the package locally, it will go off, it'll get the package, bring it back, install it, and then delete it. well, it's used in tools, like tool chains. So every time they update this create React CLI, you'd have to now re-download the newer version. Right? This here never saves a version, so it always gets the it's just pretty much. If you had it installed locally, we wouldn't be doing this step. This fetch wouldn't be happening. It would already be installed, and it would be a lot quicker. But normally, every time you use it, you update it first, which you need to go. So only for tools. Like, if you're going to create scaffolding for Angular or React, or you want to serve a web server, but you don't want to have that installed on your machine, you just So this will take a second.
So with Angular, we would have had to install like the CLI here.
Yep.
We didn't have to do it for React.
Yeah, so this tool works across the board. So you can actually use, you can download Angular the same way. So it's probably in the docs. There's actually, it looks fairly simple, that command, because the actual command we're running is called create React app, and it's in the package create React app. But it could be that Angular CLI, the package name is @Angular/something, but that's not the command you're going to run. So what you do is put a -c. So the package name is different to the command, so you can -c, or you can install multiple packages. So you might need, the package you want to run might depend on 3 other packages, so you can install all those. So this doesn't look good.
No, correct.
Let's go to the bottom. Hopefully this is just something to do with, so this is because we need to compile. It's trying to compile some C libraries. So
Build tool or something.
yeah, but installed, and hopefully, so I think mine went through without. Cool. So try to, so what it says here, if we go npm start, you can try that. So let's see. Yours may not work because of the errors, but maybe it will. Okay. Yep. Perfect. We've got a development environment and a React app sorted. So this has actually got something called live reload, I think, or hot module reloading. There's a bunch of different terms. So what that means is we can come in and change the code and save. It will rebuild, and this website will automatically update without us having to come in and hit the refresh button or do anything like that. So if we jump back into the IDE, I'll run you through what this actually is. So all the React packages, the dependencies, are in the node modules. These are what are downloaded from npm. We have a git ignore. This is for source control. The package JSON is what node is actually running, like what tells node the runtime what dependencies are required. So, yep. So you see we've got React, we've got React DOM and React scripts. These are all packages that are installed in our node modules. If we open that, they're in there somewhere. Yeah, could be DLLs in a different language or in a different framework, but yeah. Yep, and then you just ran npm start. Okay, so npm start is in the scripts. Alright, so what that actually did was call one of the node packages that was installed and the start command on that. Okay, so starts the server, compiles everything, gets everything up and running. Yeah, so if I want to put in, I don't know why. clean, for example, and yeah, whatever tool we normally have. So, or I think we use is a cross-platform, and it will just delete a certain folder. You'll see a fair bit, quite a few pieces of code to do. Yep. So this will have to be installed, but we can install that. I kind of like. I tend to. So if we want to stop this, we can just click into here and just Control C. So we can install a package. We'll install that package. There's npm i space I. So that's for install. That's short for install. You could write install. And then we want to install a package called rimraf. RIM-RAF. And that's, I think, Unix for like the RM, whatever the command is to kind of delete. Yep. And then I think that's right. What did it say? It didn't find it? Maybe I've got that wrong. It might not. It might be one word. So yeah, I think it's just one word. So what you've done now is installed that as a dependency. So this is a runtime dependency. Really, we are going to use this in development. So we don't really need to package that up and send that along with the application because it's just a dev tool, right? So what we can do is install that the same way. So it's okay that you've done it, doesn't really matter, but you put a dash capital D or dash dash dev. There's two different ways to get it. And what this will do, this will come in. I should have done it. Just let me close that because I had unsaved changes. You see here we've got a dev dependency. All right, so now instead of being bundled along with the actual application, it will be, you can, when you do an install, you can choose to install just the production, the dependencies, not the dev stuff.
So the dependency is when we build the app or whatever might be in it, but if someone else is working on this code, they download a bunch of the installs, they'll install the dev dependency on the machines and they can keep building.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Basically keeping everything in the project such that someone else is going to work on it. They'll get everything running and install and they need to work on it.
Yep. Exactly. And the bottom? Yeah, so you installed yours as a actual dependency. Okay, you've got changes here. So let's close this file and don't save and then reopen it. So the way that dot is, up a bit, sorry, the actual round dot next to package JSON. High up, there we go, and it'll turn, yep. So don't save. And then, yep. So now you've got a dev dependency. It's probably also still up in your dependencies. But yep. So let's actually use this. I think React probably handles this for us anyway. But what we can do is there's ways to get, there's hooks for commands to get before and after a command is run. So what we want to do in a lot of applications is before we build for production, which is this npm run build, right? We want to delete the existing dist build, right? So what we want to do is say pre-build, right? So this is a hook that will happen every time you run build. It will run this first, okay?
Just we have to specify if you do that, it just does it.
Yep. Yes. And then we can just call that library, raf, and then let me just take this out for a second. I'll run build. So the way we run the scripts is we run npm run start. So we just want to run build. And this will actually, you notice there's no folder here, but we had a website running. It didn't actually output any files. It's all in memory. So that's how you get this hot module reloading. You can change code. It's all happening in memory. Build is actually going to put out some artifacts. So we've got this folder now that's just popped up, and our website now is here. So if we want to serve this, it's in there. Yep. Yep. So now what we can do is if we have that pre-build step back in here, so it's under build. Let's save that. If we run build now, we should notice that everything in this folder disappears if that command's actually right. Yeah. So everything just disappeared. We've cleaned out the old stuff. Then we're running the build. And you can actually see in the terminal output that it ran the pre-build first. You can do the same for post, what happens after, and you can write your own. You can just come up with whatever you want. We could call build, you know, production or something. Right? So build, just folder right at the top. That's our dist. So we want to be able to clean that. So pre-build, we remap that, and yep. Yeah, and then watch that folder over there. Got to save your package JSON first. Just Control S in there or Command S. Sorry, this guy. Yep, Command S, and then run that. So these are just little things to get going before you even start writing code. It's just little tips and how it all kind of works and fits together. Yeah. Okay. So public is just static assets. You have you know, logo that you saw there, the robots.txt, which is something for the web server for Google to crawl. You can tell it not to crawl or whatever. So this is just going to be copied as is into the dist folder. But then everything inside a source is our actual application. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so that will live under /. So if we look in the build, we can see at the root we have this image, this manifest, this robots.txt in the root of our build. They got copied straight out of public and just dumped into our output file. Okay, so the entry for...
So what the actual copy on the website?
Yep.
Just the build folder?
In this case, yes. Everything you need should be in this folder. Yep. So this is where the actual, so what's actually happening now is we're getting a bunch of JavaScript generated for us by the React toolkit. And it should take all of the stuff in the node modules and combine them and then output them. Not everything works like that. Sometimes you need those node modules, which is when you would run your npmi with the production flag just to install those dependencies.
If you split that up and gave me that folder and I put it on my computer and open the Interpolation number or something,
yep.
then it will just the website will just work.
So we can test that by running the build again. And then we can use that npx that npx command that we just used to serve. So here it says npm install global, the serve package, but we don't want that in our global, cache sitting somewhere, getting old, getting stale. So what we can do is pretty much just copy that. And instead of running npm-i and installing it globally, we just run npx and then paste serve. Just happens that that's the package name and the command, so it works. And then it's going to serve the build folder. Okay, so we hit enter. So this was, we've got a production build here, and now we're actually going to mount that production build and serve the production build.
We can test that final build working.
Yep. So now we've got our, so now we've got a different port, and we'll click that, we can see the same thing running, but this is the actual production ready application. Cool. So I'll kill that. Now if we jump back into index, this is the entry point. So when we have a look at the package, probably might not have it, but index is a node thing. The root, the default location is looked at as index. So if you're referencing a package from anywhere, you just say my package dot whatever, or say it is React. What you're actually asking for is React/index. It defaults to the index. So that's our entry point. And then our app. Here, we've got a few things going on. We're writing what looks like HTML, which actually is the syntax for HTML, sort of. But this is called something called JSX. It's a markup within JavaScript kind of thing. You don't have a HTML page. You've got a JSX page, which is JavaScript and markup in the same thing. Okay. So this gets converted into, this doesn't actually get converted into HTML. It gets converted into JavaScript. And the JavaScript does the manual stuff of adding stuff to the screen or navigating or creating a link.
So how does this map on a word
app?
Defines it as JavaScript section.
So this index is importing app. Okay, and then it's going to render. So React DOM is the thing that puts it onto the actual web page. And it's going to take the component, then it's going to find an element. So this is the raw HTML or JavaScript that you would be writing, okay? So what it's saying is the current document, get me the root element and insert the React app. So if we go back to public, you see we've got an index that's saved along. When we have a look at the build, that JavaScript application has actually been inserted in the head as a script. And right here, we have a div with the ID root. So this will be replaced. Well, we can have a look, okay? So let's have a look at index. So let's just I don't know how to do that on this keyboard. But we can just bring some of these down a bit. We've got some JavaScript added at the bottom. That's our actual application. And in here somewhere, you got the title. We'll be getting close. Something if there's no JavaScript, then we've got our div. Right, so this is our styles. This is our what makes it look pretty, and this is our actual application running. Right, and it's going to when it calls this, it's going to look into this web page, find that, and insert our application. Okay, so all that's taken care of first. We don't have to worry about that. But if we go back into our app, we've got a few different things here. Our div is kind of like a container, a block container. So like we're containing everything inside a box. Yep. The header is just another box, really. Image, we're displaying an image. A P is a paragraph tag. And A is an anchor tag, so a link. and it's got the text learn React. So if we go back to actually here, you can actually see you got an image that's actually a GIF. You got that some text, it's a paragraph, and this link which is going to the react.org. Okay, so what we can do is actually come in to our app and change this. We jump back to the right browser, and you can see we've already just updated ourselves. Yep. So this is pretty basic. We haven't actually done any React, but we can come in and put something like a heading. H1 in HTML is the biggest line of heading. Yep. Yep. So yep. So it's pretty much, it's not HTML we're writing, but it's very similar, right? We jump back into here. We've got H1. So why wouldn't you do this in just plain HTML? That's right. So if we want to reuse this, say for example we've added some styling to it, we want to reuse it. That's where this componentization of pieces of your application works, and you make building blocks to build up bigger applications. So just create a new folder called components, and let's just create a new file called, let's create a new folder, file called heading. Yeah. Okay, heading. So first thing to get React to actually work is you need to import React. That JSX, if we go back to this, you'll see at the top, we're never actually using that, but without this, it won't compile or complain because it doesn't actually know this is not JavaScript. Okay, so adding that import lets the app actually know that this isn't JavaScript, I know it, and I'm going to convert it into JavaScript. Okay, so we want to import React from the package name, collapse everything. So we go here, that's our package name, okay, from React. And then we need to, so we're exporting a variable called heading, okay. A heading takes, so props, I'll explain this in 1 second. Okay, so props are things that are passed in to, like, you saw the div with the class name, that's a prop, a property that's on the actual tag. Okay, so we're going to pass in properties to this. By default, everything has a .children that's passed in, and that's anything that lives in between the tag. So here, if we go save that and we jump back to here, we can import components, heading, okay, control, and now, okay, so there's no props being passed in, but there is something in between, that's the implicit children, okay, so children is passed in on props because it's in between. So if I haven't screwed up, have no default, okay. It's just some JavaScript weirdness, but there's a couple of things that,
how to fix them.
yeah. So I can explain that one, but it's a little bit weird. See how I exported const heading? There's another way to do this, and that's just export default. Okay, so the difference between what this does, and I've got the opposite error than what I just had. Okay, here now this will work, but I can call this whatever I'd like, and it will still work. Okay. Yep, but I haven't actually said what the name of that is. So heading, it's just something. Yep. So there's pros and cons of both. This I tend to steer away from because it's easier. Tooling works better when you kind of dictate what the name of it is. So if you want to rename something, it can flow through. So if we undo that, we can still achieve the same.
So what's the point of this? The point of this is to inherit this style of H1.
Yep.
So that's making this style available everywhere.
Yeah.
By simply referencing the heading construct.
Yeah, so let me these compiles. So we should still have the same result as what we just had. Okay, so let's take this a step further, and let's pass in a size. Okay, and equals, say it's a number. So this is the React syntax, so we want to say 2. So what we can do is back to, here's not the most efficient code, but we can say if props dot size equals 1. You get the point. It's kind of, whoop. So jump back to, yeah, it's a little bit smaller than what it was. It's probably, let's jump to 3 to make sure it's definitely working. So it should be smaller again. Okay, so we've just encapsulated that, and we can. Yes, we'll componentize, encapsulated that logic, the whatever. We can reuse throughout our app. So we can add that styling at that level as well. So yep. So just with that, we've created. We could pass in a color, and so let's say is a string called red. Oh, keyboard. And it only works on 1. So now we can use style, which is a React thing, style, and then we want color equals props dot color. We called it OUR. Spelled it correctly, but we'll change it. So normally you don't use a style either. You do it in kind of a slightly more advanced way, but for a basic, say it's white because we're in H3. But if we change that to style 1, and hit the right browser, now we're red. Okay, so you can see how you can start building this into your own. It doesn't have to be color. It could have been anything.
And it's not just for simple text styling, it's for the whole layout page.
Yes, so you'd have the heading, yeah, like a layout section that can, constrain the width of the container, or, a chunk of a form that you want to reuse in many different places. So it can be many components. Normally start off at the smallest pieces and then compose them into bigger components that can be reused. And then that's what you build your app out of, those bigger building blocks. Okay, cool. Let's have a, there's a couple ifs in there. Let's So this is where React gets a little bit different than a lot of the normal, the other frameworks. Is data flow is one way through most of these, like all these components. So when it goes to the screen, it's been printed to the screen, but if you type something, it's an event that is fired back to update something that's then fed to the box. It's never actually saved. When you type it, it doesn't go into the text box. It goes through this loop, then ends up back in the text box. Okay, so it's a different way to keep everything in uni direction. Or
So it's a keyboard event, impressed event.
Exactly.
Something else. So it is, if you want.
Yeah. So let's add a button. We'll add. We can just do it in the same. To do this, we need to actually change this into a class. So this is now getting into a bit of object-oriented kind of programming, and we remove that, and we extend React.component. Okay, so now we have a render method.
So it extends React and it builds on the stack of functionality that's been built.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. We say that. Get this out. Say that. Let's make sure we haven't totally busted it. Looks good to me. Okay, so now we can have some state. Okay, we'll just have state equals count. Counter, and we'll set that to 0. Okay, so in our paragraph, let's change this to count, and then we'll put this dot state dot counter. So this is talking about the application, the app, and the counter is inside state. Okay, so let's save that. How did we go? I think I just opened up something. So our count is 0. So at least it's doing something. Right? So what we want to be able to do is update the state every time a button's clicked. So we're going to need a function. So let's call it update count. Okay, an update count is that you can't change this state. There's one thing about React is it's the data that you're looking at is immutable. You can't change, you can't go this dot state dot counter equals 0. You need to actually go through the React framework before it actually registers. So we got this, since we extended React.component, you have set state, okay? And set state, we want to reset this entire object to something different. So we want to set counter to this dot state dot counter plus 1. Yep. So now we've got a function that does that, but there's nothing actually triggering that. Okay. So let's just get rid of this link. Yeah. Yeah. So normally what you would do is you'd take, it's a bit more advanced JavaScript, but you would take the existing state, right? Because this, if there was 5 different variables on that, and we did just this state equals counter, then we lose that other stuff. So this actually just takes the state, and it's called spreading. It takes all those properties that are on this, takes them out of there and puts them onto this object, and then at the end we override the ones that we actually want to change. Okay, so we can leave that there, and this is normally how you'd see something like this sort of written. So button. So again with HTML, button on click. Okay, equals. So it's going to be a function. Let's see if this works first. I just want to call this dot update count. So this probably, we need to close the button, and then we need to put some content in there. So yeah. Okay, so this might not work. There's a bit of React stuff that might need to be sorted. We've got an error. Okay. So set state is undefined because what's happened is this is another one of React's kind of quirks is in the constructor. We need to take props, and then we need to call the base, so pass the props down. This is only if we need a constructor, and this isn't solving our problem, but what should solve our problem is this dot, this dot equals this dot bind, actually this dot find my keys. So what we're saying is this function needs to be bound all the time to this, because what was happening is JavaScript, the way it works, it's always working in the context of where it's run. So that function was actually being run in the context of the window, because the window was the code that was running it. So this actually makes sure that the function knows that we're in the same. Hopefully that was the problem that we're running into. Let's refresh to make sure, and we can have one. Okay, so now, so you can see an event is coming back from the screen. It's coming back. We're setting the props. The props are coming back down, re-rendering this. Yeah, so what was happening, this button was now a part of the window. It was displayed in the window. So the context was the window, and window.updateCount doesn't exist. Right? So this is just some stuff to get that to work. There's different ways to do this. So we could create this as a variable. Undo that, which is some more new JavaScript-ish kind of stuff. Useless constructor. It's just a warning, so we can get rid of that. And I'll close this because it's still running at least. Yeah. But that's a newer kind of way, the newer syntax. And then again, with the newer kind of React, you don't really write state this way anymore. There's some more concepts that are in, but this is essentially how to store state. So yeah, we can second page. Okay, so what I would do is back into here. So what we want to do is use a package called React Router. Okay, so React training, whatever's going to put us there. npm, let's add a step, install React Router. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is you don't need to remember. Because not always.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, like, so you can write a single component and inject that single component into an existing web page. You don't have to take over the entire page. You can be a small piece on a different technology stack. All you need to do is find that div and mount onto that div. It could be in a deep nested kind of thing. So it's very possible that the app is a single text box with a button. Yeah. Right. Also, you can slowly increment.
Context, as you said. The context is one page.
Yep.
Different environment.
Yeah. And there's different implementations of routing. Like, this might not be the best, right? It is. Well, actually, there's probably a lot more out there now as well. I'm not on the tools as much as I used to be. Maybe a little bit.
6 months behind time.
Yeah, 5 hours maybe, and it's done. But again, and copy paste install. The documentation is okay. So we need to bring in basic routing. So it's 3 pages. So I'll explain what this is doing. Where are we? App, paste, save. Second example, get rid of that. Save, npm start. So you noticed before we ran npm run build, starts and test are the only ones that you don't have to put run in, but essentially what we're doing is that. So you'll get tripped up, you'll see, you try to run npm build and it'll say no. But you can run start and it will work. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those helpful shortcuts that make things confusing, yeah. Okay, so we've got 3 pages, we've got about. That was pretty easy to get routing in. Let's have a look at what we're actually doing here. A React component is just a function, always. It's just JavaScript. It looks like HTML or markup, but it's just a component. This is a home screen. Right? This is our home page. It's a function that returns h2 with home. Right? We can put as much as we want inside this, but this is a bare bones. We're importing the browser router because you might not be in a browser. There's times where you want to server-side render things, so there's no browser. Like at build time, you can use different implementations to still build out routes that aren't tied to the browser. Switch is, so looks at its child routes and renders the first one that matches the current URL, okay? So it's going to take the URL and say, we're at /about. The first one that says /about, if I put this one as /about, it's not going to get to it, it's going to get to this page. Right? So this is all Switch is doing, is it's checking the URL and then putting a regex kind of match against this. The default route is here, and there's a bunch of other stuff you can do around routing, but essentially we're outputting a div that has a nav. This is just fluff. We don't need that really. It's just good practice to have the right tags in the right place. An unordered list, that's why you got the dots. Each item of the list, and then a link. This link is coming from the React router, and it does, you had the A tag with a href to create a link in the last example. This is all taken care of by a component they've componentized that takes a to, and it's to a route. So we're saying that, you know, to /about, this switch then finds /about and renders that. Does that make sense? If we go back into,
Well, the first section is how it looks on the page.
Yep.
Second section is what it does with it.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of these examples with everything in the same class, right? So you could kind of picture this as and we can just jump back into an app and take everything, paste it there. Really, we just want the home page. I didn't want to type everything, and we wanted that. Okay. So app. So I didn't export that. So this will fail. Okay, so you can see now we can get rid of all this at the bottom and componentize that out, because these in the real world will be, you know, well, hopefully not, because they would all be components themselves, right? But it can grow to be quite, if you had every single component in the same folder, it's just not maintainable. And if we jump back, we're still, home page still goes to home. No, yeah. That's
The cleanest that part of the thing.
yeah, nice and easy, straight. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more you can do with routing, and you know, yeah, I know, like, and again, it's just copy paste, see what it does, copy paste, see what it does. That's the main thing. Is it all seems overwhelming. There's so much out there, but you know, normally people that are working in this aren't experts. They don't just go off the top of their head and write, oh yeah, that's the name of that package I need to install, and I need to do this and that. It's, you know, plenty of people out there do that, but you know, then I find it hard to keep a large, if I need to do this for React and Angular, and then also know a different technology, or yeah, kind of gets you out. But
is there, so right now I've got my basic React app set up, I'm operating, but I just want to leverage some little looking UI that someone's already built with React. How would I just put in something?
yeah, sure. So there's a bunch of component libraries that are already in design systems, or that are already pre-built. We can just install the same way we installed RimRaf or React Router. So one we've been using lately, it's called Grommet.js, maybe. It is a React-based. So let's see what this guy says. Yep. So just by installing this package out of the box, we get, let's just do it, yeah? Let's take the install. So this is based on another technology called styled components. So this may, so might not be as easy as just installing this guy. There's going to need to be some more dependencies that we need. We can have a crack and try to debug what's going wrong. So this is going to install Grommet and another package called styled components. Here we've got markup inside of our JavaScript, right? But we've still got CSS outside. Right? Style components will bring CSS into the JavaScript. So you also have your CSS listed here. So you can now use the power, like here we can write JavaScript inside this. Now we have the power to do that within CSS as well. So it's a very powerful tool. Make sure everything's up and running still. Okay, so we still have something nice and pretty. Let's just import something from it. Okay. Helpful IDE tip is control space, and I'll bring up a list of all the possibilities if they're exported with the const. You know how there's a default versus const. This makes one of the tooling a lot easier. So let's just grab button. Let's copy that and let's change. Let's just add a button somewhere in about. So we want to return home, about, sorry. If we want to go over a couple of lines, you need to chuck them in parentheses. It's just a React element. Again, we press Control Space, we can see what's available to us here. Right, there's a bunch of stuff that they've already. Right, let's just go with bare bones. Okay, what's going on? So also with the React, you can only return one element as a root element. So here you can see everything is inside router. But here, we're returning two root elements. So everything needs to actually be wrapped. Okay, so that's where our container comes in. All right, so now we're returning one element, one root level element that contains two. Compiling. All right. Click me. So it's a button with some green. So then we can go back to our docs. Find our components, find our search button. So you can see in an online JavaScript editor how to actually work with it. Yeah. So you got a label. So what we did is we add a child to it, where this doesn't want a child anymore. It's taking a label as a prop. All right. So a bit of counterintuitive there. So what we can do is now strip that back to an empty tag and take label equals now our React app is yeah, there's a lot of work to get that last example like. Terrible. So yeah. So let's use a bit of style components here. So we have a button which is a style component. So what we can do is we get a bit of space here. We'll import. We can call it whatever we want because it is the default import. Styled from. This is pretty much standard on how you call that. Now what we're going to do is go const my button equals styled, and we take in our grommet button, and we use this funky backtick syntax. Now we are in CSS in JavaScript. Right? One more thing we need to do is actually use our new button. Okay. Maybe. Heading 10. I'm doing something probably very obviously wrong. Maybe, yeah, probably. This is why I'm not a front-end dev. There we go. So we got a bit of extra padding there. 10 pixels isn't a lot, so let's make it very obvious. Right. Yeah. So we can also go, now we can do stuff like pad equals a number, 40, and in here we can go back to our string interpolation from the start. So we've got props.pad, because it's actually just another React component. And then we also want to tack on the pixels in the end, so it works. So let's see what happens here. Props is undefined. So it's actually a function. So it's a function that takes the props, and then it's a bit more confusing, but
That's not a button here and not this much space around this, all that sort of stuff, not this color.
yep.
Is there a visual programming package for that, which then turns the user?
Not so much. There's a lot of work being done around software for designers to design, and then you could export to React, those kinds of things. So there is a lot of work happening around that space, and I'm very interested in that because we have, React developers waiting for design to finish. Then we turn something that's essentially the same thing over and over again into React. So if we can speed that up, that would be great. There are tools that go the other way as well that turn React component libraries into symbols for design tools. So you update a component in React, and it'll update the library of symbols inside a design tool. So that's like a WYSIWYG kind of, not really. You normally got a design, but then you normally split the screen and have a crack.
But that's, I guess that Robert library gives you the ability to just here's an example of what this will look like if you copy this code into your, it's halfway there, but it's not I know that you're thinking, well, you're going to drop like a square or just drag it to the right middle or something.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah. There's not a lot. There's probably some offerings out there, but you normally get very verbose kind of output that is not normally want things to be flexible and responsive. So you change the size. If you drag it to a certain pixel width, what does that mean when the screen's on a TV? Does it stay like that, or does it change over breakpoints? But I have seen in the latest React conference there are some tools that are design in React kind of thing. So it abstracts all that complexity away, and designers can just come in and start designing with JSX. So it's not a huge leap. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And for those, yeah, and for those, like, most people are coming for, I would like a new website for my small business or something like that, and it's like, go to, Wix or, because value for money, it's just easy to do, right? You set up, when you need a line of business application or something a bit more complicated, then, or something that's really performant and you need control over the bare metal kind of bits and pieces and custom. Yes. Yeah. 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 And it's automatically building out to a certain environment to be QA'd and progressively moving that into production. Those kinds of workflows, but yeah, that's a whole other thing. No problem. Hopefully. Yep. Yep. Mm. Yeah.
A lot of different libraries go together rather than just being like a thing that sort of
Yeah, I really like Angular. I don't use it very often anymore. Now I started off in Angular, and that's where that was the first framework I got any good at. But now with this, I notice in Angular, it kind of feels like there's a lot of magic happening. Like somehow dependency injection happens, but you don't actually see how this kind of thing happened, or the framework takes care of a lot for you, but there's not a lot taken care of, if anything. Here, you need to write what's going to happen. So it's much more explicit. If you open up the code, you see what's happening, whereas Angular, in my opinion, kind of hides a lot of that complexity, which sometimes is good, but then when something goes wrong, where do you look? Mm.
I guess we do a courses situation.
No, exactly, and that's it. The fastest thing to get the quality product right.